As we go into the sheet metal, a couple quick comments about the weldments and the cut list that it generates. That in the feature tree, we're going to look under this list, and there are going to be 13 items. So it's grouping these up. If you right-click, it's going to show you that they are creating the cut list automatically, and it updates automatically when we add new structural members to the list. So as you click on those, it's going to show you which items it's referring to, and then each of these items is going to show up in the properties list, and this is where the Weldment cut list originates from. So the lengths, the various items that get tracked are linked to the features, to the dimensions that created them. And so as we go through, we'll have the different groups. And so what I'm not seeing in here is the description. So that might be something we need to revisit later. And then if we go to the properties summary for each of the properties, this is what's being generated. And then the cut list table, this is what we would expect to see in the drawing once we've created. So again, description is not being shown here. So something in the cut list summary, or something that we created from the library feature, which I think I was looking for, didn't make its way over. So it's kind of one of those, everything's half by half by 060. So don't know that I have to have those in, but if we did want to provide a little more, then we can do the stay consistent 0.50, 0.50 by 0.06, and we have that as, did this fall into the LS? Yeah, this was the LS angle, so we'll stay with that description. Make sure I'm tying into it. Alright, and I want to reproduce that on each of the items, so I'm going to just do a Control-C. Now, the configurations are showing up. So this is going to currently be set to specify configurations. That's kind of interesting. I would have expected to be all configurations, but since we haven't created any, I don't know that that's that big of a deal. So description again, and then paste, and tab will allow it to update. Item 3 is also going to be, alright, so if I had lined this up, I'd have to go back and look. If I'd lined this up in the library feature, I believe I wouldn't have to go through and fill this out. So need to do a little exploring there and find out where that description originates. Oh, and then this is the straight. So I'm just going to change this one over to bar, and it'll be the 0.05 by 0.06. Alright, and then the materials, if we needed it, all of it's going to be aluminum, so that'll show up somewhere. Either as the material that we haven't set yet. I was going to say that we set over here, but not quite. Alright, and then one more. Alright, so if we had a lot of these elements, last thing I really want to do is go through and have to do that for each item. So tab, go back to the first. Now when I go over to the cut list table, I get the descriptions, the lengths, and based on our distances, total length would be interesting to have in that list. It just kind of depends on our lengths and how we want to break those down. Alright, so notice that the names update, but one of the things that I've encountered is that changing this name does not change the properties, so it's kind of a one-directional, monodirectional. You set it in the properties and it updates out here. Alright, so the cut list is mainly for our weldments, and if I did not want to Maybe a better way to say that is, if I wanted the sheet metal to have its own table, be completely separate, this would be the stopping point for this this part of the enclosure, just the weldment. Since this is about mixing the items and managing those that crossover, the sheet metal will still show up in the cut list, but it doesn't respond the same as if it was separate, I guess is a better way to say that. Alright, so at the end of this mix then I'm going to go ahead and hide all of my solid bodies that are the weldments. You can still see where it ties in, where it picks up, and the material, well, we'll come back to that. I think I'm going to stay with the 16th aluminum for the sheet metal to start, and we'll get the sizes, and then when I'm making the estimate, the quote for this project, that'll be based on similar materials, just slightly different thicknesses on the sheet portion. Alright, so we have the weldment placeholder. As soon as we add a sheet metal item, we're going to then get a sheet metal placeholder, and we're going to keep those kind of separate. So if I need to do something in weldment, I'm going to roll back to this point, add, take away, do whatever I'm doing, and then make sure that all the sheet metal kind of stays in the sheet metal area. Alright, so to activate the sheet metal, right click, and we'll switch over to the sheet metal tools. Alright, so it'd be nice to say that don't ever mix them. But there, as said in the very beginning, is it's not really complex. For quoting capabilities for fabrication, I'm going to be able to get my my usable geometry out without too much of a headache. And there comes a point to where, when this becomes very complex, that I'm going to want to build this frame in an assembly, and then the weldments will be part of that top-down assembly. The sheet metal will be another component. So the frame gets built into the assembly, the weldment becomes a sub-part or a part component in that assembly, the sheet metal becomes a separate component in that assembly. Alright, so some things of note with the sheet metal is if I follow this contour all the way around, I'm going to have one piece of metal with two bends. That really isn't what I'm desiring to do, basically because my fabrication techniques, my available equipment, I don't really have the precision bending, cutting, shearing for that size of material, and I don't want to material handle the large sheets, the 36 120s, 144s or larger to do this material. So ordering it in 3 foot by 3 foot, 36 by 36 or 24 by 48, whatever they were, is going to be manageable for this project for me. Alright, so you get to decide what the best way to go about creating your geometry is. I want to add sheet metal to the outside. Remember that we put all of these angled pieces to the interior, so now we're putting the sheet metal to the exterior to build out to it. And I'm not overly concerned with the maybe the little bit of a gap, or depending on the variation in the materials, if there's a little bit of a reveal along those edges. My intent to kind of seal this up is to put a bead of silicone and then when we tighten everything down, just pretty much let that be the the gasket seal. All right, so first piece of sheet metal, we're going to just use the right plane, and I will add one to the back. I can also go into the 3D sketch, and we can create the, we call it the dreaded sketch plane, which inserts a plane into a 3D sketch and is a little more difficult to use, but can be handy, but certainly not the first choice. And then we'll go in and create an actual physical plane that we can also sketch on. So very, very similar techniques. One of them will play out to our preference. So since I need these to be basically the 5 sides of the cube, I'm going to have 5 pieces of sheet metal. Alright, so my sketch then for the let's see, we'll go into the right plane and open a sketch. and it goes normal 2. If I have any doubts, I can do the Control 7, rotate it around, figure out what I need. And within each of these pieces of sheet metal, because they are singles, they're going to need the sketch that is associated with them. So an as sketch line from midpoint to midpoint, and that's pretty much what I need for my sheet metal. So habit is going over to features all the time, so you'll see me do that a lot. And then I'll jump over to sheet metal, hopefully, and base flange tab. Because these are flat pieces, there's not a whole lot of difference between the extrude boss base. The main thing is going to be coming back to those properties that I just showed you in the cut list. Sheet metal is going to have a little more functionality than what we would see in just a standard feature. So base flange tab, first thing it should ask me is the thickness. We're not really doing any bends. I just want to manage these items, but 2 millimeters, 80 thousandths is probably a reasonable blend with a K factor of 0.3. And the K factors we're not, again, because we're not doing the bends, we're not concerned with, but as we stress and deform the material, it's going to allow it to grow as we make the bends, is to account for that deformation. Alright, so direction 1, because I have the 3D sketch, I'm going to go up to vertex, and either the vertex, the sketch points will work. Direction 2 also then becomes an up to vertex, and then I'm just going to tie all of this together, and we need to do either a Control 3 or a Control 4, I think that's what it went normal to, and make sure that the material is to the outside. Once I have that, we go ahead and hit OK. We will get our sheet metal placeholder, and then base flange 1 will be underneath it, and then the flat pattern. Alright, and the flat pattern stays suppressed, and because we're not really doing any bends, the flat pattern isn't going to do anything for us here. So that's kind of a minimal item here. Alright, so if I go back in and edit the sketch, then the insert plane into a 3D sketch is going to do, very similar. So the reference entities, I want to go to the right plane again. We're just going to stay with those. And then the second reference will be at the vertex, so that we can offset a little bit. And then that becomes a sketch plane inside of the 3D sketch. If I needed additional geometry or a compound or something, that would be my preferred method. Since it's not very convenient to work with on the rest of this, is not necessarily my first choice. This will be for illustration. So one of the things I've added in the heads-up display that you'll have to look for is the View 3D sketch plane, which should be under Views and sketch planes, and now we see it, now we don't. Alright, so that's the sketch plane that's actually in the 3D sketch. So if I right click and insert sketch, this is pretty much the only place that I'm going to be able to insert a sketch onto that plane. So use it carefully, sparingly, however you want to say. I think the feature plane is a lot more functional. Alright, so since this is on one end of the geometry, when we go into the sheet metal, tell it to create the base flange, and I give it an up to vertex, I'm going to be going to the opposite end. Still need to make sure that my direction, since this is going interior, I need to reverse the direction so that it goes up and out to the outside, and then accept. Alright, so at that point, I can turn the Show 3D, and notice it's named Plane 3 at Envelope. The envelope is the 3D sketch. Alright, and then dimensions for the 3D sketch. I think that comes up when we actually click on it. Alright, and then the third would be to, if I pre-select the right and the same or near the same vertex and go into plane, with the pre-select it's going to put an actual plane reference, Alright, so a plane feature on the feature tree, and then right click and sketch, and then we're basically doing the same. Alright, so it just kind of depends on the complexity of the shape of the sheet metal, what our ultimate goal is to be able to make a best decision on these selections. So an up to vertex, make sure it's to the outside, it looks pretty good. Alright, so again, if I wanted this to be one piece, I would have gone into that very first base flange, drawn up and over, and the three lines would have made this with a single piece with two bend lines, and that would have the net effect of, well, giving me the three sides that I need. Alright, so I'm through with plane 3 here for the last two sides. And then, kind of like what I did with the weldments, my first thought is, well, I could just open up a sketch on the front plane and draw two lines. But keep in mind that if it accepts that, they're both going to offset the same way. So if this one offsets to the interior, this one offsets to the exterior, vice versa. So we're still going to need the separate sketches. Alright, so the front and the back are the same geometry. It recognizes that and gives it the sheet metal symbol. And if we show that, somewhere in there I should be able to hide. Maybe we need to expand those out. And I'll hide the two pieces. Alright, so that gives me kind of a cleaner slate to work with. Alright, so in the front plane, we open up the sketch. We'll pick a side, go into the sheet metal, see if it'll let me go right into the base flange from that location. Showing me the direction, looks like it's on the interior, so let's reverse and go up to vertex for direction 1. And then direction 2, also up to vertex, and then accept. Even though it's not showing me the preview, I'm not going to worry about it until it doesn't show up after I've accepted the feature. So that looks like it's, okay, that is to the outside. Alright, and then the last one on the front plane again. Mainly for convenience, I don't know that I would have created the other planes automatically there, at least without some kind of good reason. So let's just stay on the planes that we're working with since they're operational. Up to vertex, and then direction 2, up to vertex, and then we'll check the side, so that is coming exterior. Alright, looks good. Alright, so if I want to show everything again, clicking it one more time actually hides everything first, and then when we show, now we're showing all of the geometry. You can see the interface between the weldment components and the sheet metal. Alright, so listed as one of the advantages is that we're going to be able to put those hole locations in. I need to pick out a handle since this is going to be lifted on and off of the equipment that it's enclosing, and I want to add in the fasteners that are basically going to be the final assembly for this. Alright, so we'll call that good for now, and on the next video we will be putting in those hole locations, and that will be with the sketch driven pattern. So a little preview there.